Aloha, Inspired Moneymakers. Welcome to Inspired Money, the live stream podcast where we invite a panel of experts to help us to make more, give more, and live more. I'm Andy Wong, your host. Today we're focusing on living more. We're talking classics, reimagined, restorations, and resurrections in the car collecting world. Whether you're a seasoned car collector or a curious enthusiast considering your first vintage purchase, this episode's for you. In an era where AI and mass production dominate, the allure of classic cars endures as a celebration of human design and ingenuity. If you followed our previous episodes on horology, where we celebrated the tradition, artistry, and precision behind timepieces, I think cars can be very similar. While modern cars may excel in speed, reliability, and efficiency, classic cars captivate us with their unique designs, manual craftsmanship, and the sheer joy of driving. Classic cars were born in a time when designers used pencil and paper to create flowing lines and elegant shapes. The world of classic car restoration brings history, craftsmanship, and passion together to bring automotive legends back to life. Classic cars, often 20, 30 years old, can get you from point A to point B, but it's more than that. They're a timeless symbol of innovation and cultural significance, each with its own story and unique charm. So buckle up and get ready for an inspiring ride through the past, present, and future of classic cars. This episode is brought to you by my financial advisory firm, Runnymede Capital Management. I want to invite you to do a 3-minute plan that helps to calculate your max retirement income. A recent Schwab survey said about 2/3 of Americans have not plotted their goals and documented a financial plan. I have clients who identify and set retirement goals like buying a second home, taking an annual trip, or even buying a classic car. If you're curious to see if a financial plan can help you feel more in control of your finances, doing a 3-minute plan is a great way to start. You can go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. That's GETPLAN. Check it out, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Now, let's welcome in our amazing panel of experts. We've got Bruce Meyer, prominent businessman and real estate investor in Beverly Hills. He's also the founding chairman of the Petersen Automotive Museum, where he remains an active board member. Renowned for his world-class car collection and his role in elevating hot rods to collectible status, he continues to race and rally his cars internationally, reflecting his lifelong passion for automotive excellence. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Exactly. We have Lauren Fix. She's a national recognized automotive expert, journalist, and television host, known as the Car Coach, providing insightful analysis on automotive topics for Car Coach Reports, the Weather Channel, Inside Edition, Oprah, many other media outlets. She serves as president and board member for the North American Car and Truck of the Year Awards and is the CEO of Automotive Aspects, Inc., with extensive experience in media consulting and public relations. Lauren, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Next, we have Phillip Griot. He's CEO and owner of Griot's Motors, a Tacoma-based business specializing in restoration, consignment, and collector car storage. Raised by certified car nut Richard Griot of Griot's Garage, Phillip has cultivated a lifelong passion for the automotive hobby, dedicating himself to delivering world-class service and sharing the joy of classic cars with others. Welcome, Phillip.
Hey, Andy. Thanks for having me.
And then we have Ed Bolian back on the show, fresh from his civic duty. I understand he's been serving on a jury and glad that he could battle the traffic and make it home to join us. He's founder of VINwiki, a platform that brings automotive stories to life through crowdsourced data. He's also a former Cannonball Run record holder, showcasing his passion for high-speed adventures and automotive culture. Ed, welcome back.
Thank you for having me as always, and it's great to be here.
I so look forward to learning from all of you and hearing all of your car collecting adventures. and living vicariously through all of you. Let's go straight to segment 1. The Renaissance of automotive classics celebrates the resurgence in interest, restoration, and preservation of historic and iconic cars. This movement underscores the cultural and historical significance of classic vehicles, emphasizing their impact on automotive design, technology, and society. Classic cars, typically over 20 to 30 years old, are restored using authentic parts and techniques. Iconic models like the Lamborghini Miura, Mercedes-Benz 540K Special Roadster, and Bugatti Type 57 Stelvio showcase the evolution of design and engineering excellence. Restoration involves disassembly, inspection, bodywork, mechanical overhaul, and interior restoration, all aimed at maintaining historical accuracy. These cars are symbols of their eras, reflecting technological advancements and cultural trends. Events and auctions highlight the ongoing enthusiasm for these vehicles, preserving automotive heritage for future generations. This resurgence allows new audiences to appreciate the rich legacy and historical significance of classic cars, emphasizing the value of restoration beyond aesthetics or financial gain. Bruce, get us started. How have you seen the appreciation for classic cars evolve over the years?
Okay, let me just mention, I saw the video. I couldn't hear a thing. Did anybody else hear anything from that?
Yeah.
I could hear. Anybody else?
Okay, I didn't hear a thing. It just, all I saw was, the question is, as far as appreciation, is that where you're going with this?
Yeah. Curious how you've seen the evolution of people's love for classic cars.
So for sure, I'm the oldest here. In my mid 80s, and I've been doing this really since birth. I've loved cars since birth, and I've never really bought cars with the idea of appreciation. I've just tried to buy the best example, and I think if you buy the best example, the appreciation will follow. I think appreciation has also come from the cost of doing restorations and just the general upkeep and so forth has those prices have increased, and maybe the values along with them. I mean, I bought some cars that have been great, and I've never bought them with the idea of appreciation. So I might be the wrong guy here, because I buy them all out of passion, and I try and buy the right one.
Okay, well, not looking at it as an investment, but has there been an evolution in people's love for classic cars? Like, how has that changed since you were a kid?
Well, what's interesting is, so I started in like 1970. I bought my first car that I still have today. It's a Ferrari, and that's gone up appreciably. But at the same time, I had a love for Packards and Pierceros, and they have not appreciated so much. You can buy those cars today for less than the price of restoration. If you bought a Porsche or a Ferrari, you've probably seen some pretty significant gains. I think that has a little to do with the age group that are buying the cars now. I'd be more interested in hearing what Phillip Griot has to say. I'm a big fan of the family, and it's nice to see you here.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Phillip, so your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult question for me at 35 to answer. I know from my childhood, I have watched a lot of change. I think just in the way people have enjoyed automobiles. I think I grew up on the Concours lawn. I grew up in race paddocks and whatnot. And I remember when my dad had a Miura P400S that he bought for 25 grand, and they weren't worth restoring at the time. And he still, we're not allowed to talk about Miuras in this household anymore, mainly because that changed. It rapidly changed. And I think there was a time where they were just cars, and people who were overly enthusiastic about just owning them because they were beautiful and they appreciated the history of them, the sounds of them, just the raw nature of them. I think those people are they're still here. And if they were lucky enough to hold on to some of these really special cars, then they've done quite well. But I think in the last 10 years, you've seen some maturing of automobiles as a marketplace. Funny that you mentioned, a previous podcast about watches and the similarities there. And I had a conversation with a tech. I won't say he was in tech, and he was concerned that at some point EVs would completely replace classic cars and whatnot. And I compared it to a Casio watch that came out and essentially made a Rolex, irrelevant in the sense of telling time and accuracy and whatnot, but it became even more powerful in regards to what it said about someone's personality or someone's taste. And I think cars, especially right now, with the abundance of capital in markets right now and the maturity in the car market, they've seen a rapid appreciation, not just in terms of, fandom, but also in valuation as well. So,
Philip, in this like current renaissance of classic cars, where you saw the Ferrari Miura, like it changed a lot. And what do you think is driving that renaissance, especially among younger generations?
Among younger generations, I think it's a little bit different. I think, the Miura stories was classic. There's not that many of them. And, they're expensive to restore. I think at the time it was a $25,000 car that cost about $250,000 to restore at the time. I think it was $2,000. But right now with people my age, it's really that, well, at least for, cars built after 2000 that are now considered classic, or 1990 to 2000, which are considered classics. Those cars were never built, I think, with the, I don't think they were built with the mentality that they were going to be valuable 30 years from the day they rolled. I don't think any of these cars were for a while. And so it's hard, even though the production volumes are higher than the older cars that, I think Bruce is well known to collect. A lot of these cars were beat up. They were junked. They were thrown away. And so the generation, the millennial generation, is probably looking at cars where you have this concentration now of design elements in modern cars that are becoming less and less, or more and more impersonal, really hard to stand out when everyone has either a Model X or a Model S in a parking lot, and you get to choose between black, white, or silver. You see a lot of, I don't know, I think you see a lot of overlap between all the manufacturers today. And I think my era is looking back and saying, okay, well, how much is it to buy, a 1995 Range Rover Classic and make it operate at, modify it slightly so it operates safely and it looks great. And I think that's where my age is going back to, is just really great looking cars with all the knowledge of how to, kind of repair and remove all the issues that were inherent to those when they were new, and just have fun. So that's where we're at.
Lauren, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. And I do want to ask you, like, how do you explain the enduring appeal of classic cars to a modern audience that's increasingly focused on like technology?
Well, there are some classics that will always be of value. And I know Bruce will agree because I think he has a couple of these, but like you're talking about a 65 Shelby. That's a vehicle that is a classic that will always hold its value. We monitor all and we attend most of the auctions around the country. And also we restore and collect old Mustangs. So for me, that is my passion. And we've noticed the shift in collector cars. We own a company called Classic Tube. We make pre-bent tubing products for brake lines, fuel lines, and so forth. And so we've got a really good feel for the market when we're getting calls for really like a lot of Fox body chassis, which is 79 Mustang to like 87. We're seeing a lot of pull for that. And I find it interesting because to me, that was a car I had in high school. So you can do the math. But and when you think about it, it's the cars that we dreamt, we lusted after in high school are what the next generation is looking at. And my kids are in their 30s and they understand the early Shelbys. And actually my daughter's name is Shelby, but their lust for cars is different. For my son, it's Porsches. I have a Porsche in the garage he would like to have, but he's not going to get. But my son-in-law has one as well. And it's funny that Porsches will always work across all, it's like Ferraris and like Lamborghinis and all of the great cars. Like I know Ed has a couple of very awesome vehicles. Those are the kind of things that people will always lust after. But when you're looking at other vehicles, muscle cars, for example, if you were trying to buy a 55 to 57 Chevy, you can get them dirt cheap now. Where when I was a kid, you couldn't get near them. But the kids today, they're not interested in the 50s cars. A Model T and a Model A was six figures when I was younger. And now they can't sell them to save their lives. And it's funny because I'm on the board of directors for the Pierce Arrow Museum here in Buffalo. And we can access some of those vehicles now for our collection for our museum at reasonable prices because they're just not holding their value. So you have to, for us, how we got into it was you buy what you love, the car that you've always wanted, which typically is a car from high school. And that car that you've always wanted, your neighbor had it, your uncle, your brother, whatever it might be. When you own that car, you buy it because you like it. If it goes up in value, great. If it doesn't, you won't be sitting on a Carmen Ghia or something and thinking, oh my gosh, I bought this thing because someone told me it'd be worth something. And I know a lot of people that have done that. They bought cars exclusively because they thought that they would go up in value. And it's hard to do that when you're talking about muscle cars in general. There are certain specific vehicles that will always do well. 63 split window coupes. I mean, certain cars that like even for now, the new cars, a Demon 170, that's a collectible for now. Will it be a collectible down the road? Well, it depends how many they make. And so we see a lot of that going on as well. I have a Ford GT 2017. That's a collectible because there's not a lot of them produced that year and there's very few heritages. So when you want to buy something, you want to look for that provenance that gives it significant value down the road. It's got to have limited production. It can't be a mass production car like a Dark Horse Mustang. They're going to make as many as they can sell. That's not going to help you down the road. If you're looking to get into the Ferrari market, you might be able to get into a 308 at a reasonable price. But the problem is you have to look at the maintenance side of those type of things. And I think people forget about when they buy a really cool car. And I know that Ed knows this for a fact because we talk about this, he and I, that when you buy a car, then you don't think about the maintenance, the insurance and all that. It all adds up. And then you realize maybe I shouldn't have purchased this car. So you should always look into truthfully what your passion is, and then do a deep dive into it, use those forums, talk to other people, go to car shows, go and talk to people. Hey, what do you like about this car? What wouldn't you buy? I mean, there's a lot of cars I'd like to have. And after talking to the owners, I'm like, maybe that's not going to work, especially if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, because you are putting a lot of money into that. And there is a maintenance side to everything.
Ed, you're crowdsourcing.
Well said.
Thank you.
Ed, you're crowdsourcing with VINwiki. Do you see that sort of like the changing taste for different types of cars with different age groups and that movement?
We do. And, inevitably value, as has been discussed, follows legitimate enthusiasm. And the reason that we see an evolution of the car market is we see an evolution of the new buyers in vintage cars as whatever is vintage changes. And so most of us that have loved cars for a while remember the explosion in value of muscle cars that kind of started about 20 to 30 years ago, because the people who grew up loving them started to mature in life and in credit and in financial ability. And so they started to buy the cars. And so what we see today is that the people who grew up loving 80s and 90s cars finally have the ability to start participating in that marketplace. And these new entrants into the market are what we're seeing, add to the successes in value, because they're like, I do want to live with a Diablo or an XJ220 or an EV110 or a 930 or whatever it is. And all of these cars, the values reflect that because the transaction velocities reflect that. And the utilization is there because a lot of these cars can be made quite functional. That was sort of the era where especially a lot of the European sports car manufacturers started to build cars that were at least somewhat viable for regular use. And so, different than a Countach, you might say, people are putting real miles on Diablos, on the ones that they're comfortable with. Now, my personal attitude has always been diametrically opposed to Bruce's, because I buy the worst examples of the coolest cars because that's all I could possibly afford. And I've been able to do so a little bit ahead of my generation just based on building up bulletproof credit over the years. And so as long as the banks keep being willing to, lend me money, I can invest in the cars that I grew up loving. And so for me, when I'm 16 years old in 2001, the Lamborghini Murcielago comes out. And for me, nothing can ever be cooler than that because it was the coolest car at the time that I was so dreaming about every possibility of recreating my own version of Cannonball Run with a vertically opening doors. Unfortunately, I've avoided the spandex to go with it. But that car will probably go crazy 10 years from now, because at that point, more people will be sufficiently financially established enough to do that. Now, what does that mean right now for pre-war cars and the really significant cars, the 50s, 60s, and 70s? We don't know. And that is the real uncertainty in the broadest sense for the collector car market. And that's why everything that Bruce does and kind of his cohort of people that have supported and championed the market and the idea and the representation of some of these cars is so critical. Now, we did see something kind of for the first time out of nowhere this January in Scottsdale, where muscle cars and resto rods went insane. And cars that should have brought 200 grand brought $1 million. And the best theory there is that the baby boomer generation is retiring and they're bored and they have a lot of money from either saving or selling businesses or some other liquidity, and they are putting it all in the market. And so as we've seen so many different financial, aspects of the world coming into play, there's a lot of really, really wild stuff going on. We did a video recently where we looked at how many $1 million cars there were on Earth. And we dove into exactly what it was. And I had done the same type of a video 5 years ago in 2018. So I guess I did it a few months ago. It was actually in 2023. And we went back looking at 2003, which is we just used that because it was right before the Ferrari Enzo came out. And there were between 1,000 and 1,500 $1 million cars on Earth. In 2018, there were just shy of 20,000 $1 million cars on Earth. And last year, there were 30,000, a 50% increase in the span of 5 years. And so you look at how much more capital is in the collector car market, and that is reflective of who is putting it in and how much enthusiasm there is for the cars.
Bruce, anything to add?
No, I think it's really well said. I really couldn't add anything, but it is one thing. Ed drives his cars, and the Ferrari set generally didn't drive their cars so much. The Porsche people have always driven their cars, and now I'm finding low mileage Porsches are a big deal. I think if it came down to one mark that kind of hits all generations, as Porsche. That just is such a strong brand. It's been so well managed. It's not unlike Rolex. They've watched who their buyers are, the demographic. They do well in races. They do well with intellectuals. They do well with drivers. And I kind of lean towards Porsches. I've been driving them since 1960, but I also like the Mustangs, and I like all the Shelby cars, and I just bought a car from the Griots. So, I just buy what I like. I have to like the look of it. For me, it has to look great. Above all, there have been some I've got a lot of hot rods, but and there's some really ugly, awful hot rods, and I've never bought one of those. I've only bought the best looking. So I think the aesthetic is very important to me.
Anybody else want to chime in before we move on to the next segment? Let's go to segment 2. Car restoration is an intricate process that demands precision, expertise, and a deep appreciation for automotive history. This art and science involve returning a classic vehicle to its original or enhanced condition through meticulous attention to detail and authentic parts. Key steps include disassembly and inspection, where parts are cataloged, stored, and inspected for damage. Body and frame restoration involves rust removal, panel replacement, and ensuring structural integrity. Mechanical restoration includes rebuilding or upgrading engines and transmissions, and enhancing suspension and brakes for improved performance. The painting process requires surface preparation, applying multiple coats, and adding clear coats for protection and gloss. Interior restoration focuses on refurbishing upholstery and trim to match original specifications. Authentic restorations, especially of rare models like the Jaguar E-Type or Bugatti Type 57, often fetch higher auction values. Attention to detail and high-quality craftsmanship significantly increase a vehicle's worth. Understanding this complexity highlights the blend of historical preservation and modern engineering in car restoration. Lauren, you mentioned that you have a parts company. Can you talk about what are the most critical aspects to consider when restoring a classic car to its former glory?
Yeah, we also restore cars under Fixed Motorsports, and we have award-winning cars, mostly Shelbys and Mustangs, but we've done other vehicles. When it comes to brakes, that's something that's overlooked a lot. We get calls typically first for the parts, and they sit there for years until, because everyone tries to collect the parts in advance. It's like buying the wheels for the vehicle and putting them on, and then the vehicle's far from being done. I'm sure we've all seen that. But brakes are so important. So no matter how beautiful your car is and how fast it is, there's nothing like whoa power. You can have all the go power you want, but brakes, brake lines, getting all those components together are really important. When we restore a car, they take about 2,500 hours per vehicle. And if you want a winning car, that's what it's going to take. If you're looking at a daily driver, some of you can just drive to the cruise nights and the car shows and the cars and coffees. You're talking probably between 1,500 and 2,000 hours to get it from the time you buy it and it's in need of restoration to its actual finished product. And the time of that it takes time, and you've got paint to cure and everything. But I think although it may look great, if it's not running properly and it doesn't stop properly, and you don't think about things like fuel lines and things that are really, really important from the safety standpoint, I think you can find yourself in a lot of trouble quite quickly. And typically when you go to a restoration shop, it's really, really important that you make sure that whoever you're going to is an expert in that field. Anybody can say, I can restore a Camaro. Great. But do you really understand about protecto plate and data plates and matching numbers and how, you don't want to get rid of that part or this part, because you can't get these components anymore, especially when you're talking about cars once they reach 1970, when you need all those emission parts, which you can't find because everyone took them off and they threw them out. And so this is where going to places like Carlisle and swap meets to try and find these parts. And that could be Facebook Market, eBay, whatever it is. But collecting all the parts is so critical, because if you're missing key components, it could decrease the value of the vehicle. It won't win at a show. And if you're building it to restore it and do it correctly, especially if you're bringing it to something the level of Amelia Island or Pebble Beach, it really has to be 100% correct. And whoever's restoring it has to be, I would say, backed by someone else. I would ask someone like Bruce, hey, who did you use to restore your Mura, for example? And he would say, I use so-and-so, and that would give me credibility that this person's actually going to restore the car properly, put the proper amount of time and effort in to make that car absolutely perfect. Because you don't want to show up with orange peel. You don't want to show up with parts that are wrong, especially some of these shows, whether you're talking about it's not a fit and fitness show like Mustang Club of America or Bloomington Gold for the Corvettes or any of these brand specific shows, they'll destroy you. And when you get your sheet from the concourse judges, that it's enough to make you cry. And even AACA is pretty specific. So you have to make sure that if you're going to restore a car for collectability, for showing and for making it a beautiful piece to put in your garage or into your museum, your collection, you might say, you really want to make sure that it's right and you have the proper restorer doing it.
Yeah,
I agree.
That requires dedication.
Mhm.
Bruce, can you share an example?
Yeah,
of
I can. I did get the sound on that video, and
good.
and yeah, thanks. and to hear Lauren talk about the number of hours it takes to restore a car, that is so true. And to me, that's just money, money, money. You know, the hourly rate was $20, then it was $40, then it was $50, and now it's $100 and over $100. So when you can do the math, when you start adding in, you know, that kind of hours to restore a car, you better be prepared for that. And the running of the car, the brakes, everything have to be great if you're going to be a driver. Some people just want show cars, and they're less concerned about some of the parts that I am concerned about. But you know, in the restoration world, there was a trend. It started in Pebble Beach to over restore. And now the trend is to leave it well enough alone. Leave it alone. If it's an original car, you try not to restore it. It's more preservation. So I think the trend has gone from restoration to preservation. And then if you do decide to restore, you better be ready for a big financial burden, and you got to do it right. There's no point doing anything but other than correct. Another important thing is with regards to whether it's a Mustang or any muscle car, or hot rod, you got to pick a point in time that you're restoring to, because you know, like the 65 Mustangs, if you want to keep it a 65 Mustang, that's one thing. If you want it to turn it into a car that you can drive and take on rallies and go fast with, then you've got to upgrade the brakes and, you know, make sure it's, you know, roadable. So I don't know. And also when you restore a car, you better count on a year or 2 or 3 to do it right.
Okay.
Timing is important, really big deal.
You have a beautiful collection. Any one car stand out to you as being particularly challenging to really bring it to the level that you want it to?
The Whittington 935.
Yeah, yeah. That car is amazing. No, you know, I use a shop in Scotts Valley, Bruce Canepa, and he you know, we always kid him, why pay less? I mean, his hourly is probably $150 to $200 an hour. I mean, you pay for that, but he understands race car Porsches. I'm trying to think. If there's one car that probably resonates to me as a collectible car, it would be a 300 SL. And there's a few shops that specialize in those, and those cars over the years haven't gone crazy in price. Like I remember in the 80s, Ferraris were just going up daily, and then in 89, 90, they just the bottom fell out, and they, you know, the pricing really dramatically changed. I think with the 300 SL, and also in a way with the Mustangs, they've kind of, you know, had a steady increase, and you know, the price has been pretty consistent. But I think restoring a Gullwing now is $1 million tab. Wow. I have a Gullwing and a Roadster, and that was my first car out of college, was a Gullwing. It was $4,000. So it's just you know, you got to pick the right car if you're going to do a restoration on it.
Ed, you always talk about picking the worst examples to restore. What's your most impressive restoration, and what makes it stand out?
Well, and see, again, this is where my logic will differ greatly from Bruce and really from the cars that Lauren does, because my margin of restoration is from wholly unacceptable to functional. I stop there because I'm just going to go drive the wheels off of it and get more rock chips. And so, you know, like I have a really rare 1 of 10 U.S. manual LP640 Roadsters that's been in 3 accidents. It was spray painted as a repair job, has a lot of terrible aftermarket parts. It was, I mean, horribly mistreated. And I got it and I serviced it up to be super solid mechanically. And I just, you know, wrapped wrapped it the color that it should have been and made it look as stock as it can, especially the further away you stand from it. And I love driving the car. Now, one day, will it be worth a 2,000-hour restoration by probably a shop in Italy where the people who have retired from the factory just, drink espresso until it's time to drink beer, and then they, make the car look better? Yeah, one day that'll happen, and I'll still be putting miles on it at that point. And, as you restore these cars, someone at some point has to make a financially irrational decision to preserve and perfect that car in whatever the standard is at the moment. And the fact that there are people with the means to do so is amazing. I cannot do that. I can buy a terrible car, spend a little bit of money to make it good enough that anybody can take it to Cars and Coffee and love it, and eventually make a little bit of money because there's still profit in that part of the equation. There's not usually profit in the 2,500 to 5,000 hour restoration process. You are going to go ahead of the market and then hope that the market catches up.
I agree. I agree with Ed. You
Totally.
got to make that decision, where you want to be. And Ed drives the wheels off his cars, and he doesn't get, doesn't overspend on the restoration. And that's probably and also while he's doing that, hopefully the cars have appreciated in value. So I think that's a good, if I had to pick a track, that it would be Ed's.
Sounds prudent. Phillip,
That
can
is
you talk?
high praise from you, sir. Thank you.
Phillip, can you talk about Griot Motors and like the restorations that you're doing? Like, what level are you shooting for? And I don't know if you can share with everybody, give some context. Like, what does a Concourse-Level quality restoration look like? What is that process?
Well, so we do a bunch of different restorations, but a Concours restoration is very specific, lengthy restoration that involves a lot of scrutiny, high level attention to detail. It is not a cheap restoration. And it is specific to the owner's desire to probably show up at Pebble Beach and win, or show up to a Concours and display a car. To be frank, I see far fewer of these restorations than we used to. Almost, I think Bruce is correct. There's a few different points where some of the aspects have changed. A lot of my clients right now want to pick and choose what they improve on their cars and kind of live with some of the warts. But a Concours restoration is very specific. You were trying to identify through research the specific down to the nuts and bolts what was original about the car, and generally you cannot bring in a correct car and consider it as original in most cases. So I think there's a saying that an original car is always correct, but a correct car is not always original. And so the documentation, the specifics of what material, how you affix that material, how you work that material, that comes into play. But I have seen far fewer of those restorations over the last 5 years than I did the 5 years before that. Even in Richard's personal collection, that's all he used to do. And now he wants to do a Volkswagen Rabbit that gets over 50 miles to the gallon as just a fun project. He's completely done a 180 of what he desires in his cars, and they all have to be drivable. I will say, specific to the earlier comments about safety, I think a lot of people can get any restoration to 90%. We get a lot of our least favorite car that comes in is an incomplete car, or a car that has been restored by another shop that was not restored properly, where you have to start undoing things that were not done well, where people have, paid someone in Latin America to do it because it's cheaper, or, and people either cut corners or they're unaware of what they're doing. And I find that it's easy to get to 90%. The last 10% where you have confidence in your car, where you can stand on the brakes, where you can downshift without, grinding gears or, get on the accelerator without any hiccups, through the natural, rev range where, obviously the carburetors have been tuned correctly. We try and take a bat to the car before we ever hand the keys back to the owner. We put it through 250 to 500 miles of, I wouldn't say abuse, but we put a couple layers of temporary film over the car, and then we go find what is going to break before we send it back to the owner, because we have seen cars come back, other shops, other restorations where, you tap the brakes once and all the brake fluid just dumps out onto the floor. And it's just, it's not necessarily terrible, but I think a lot of shops overcommit themselves to project scope they probably are unprepared to fulfill. And I think in that domain, the 300 SL was brought up. I would decline that car if it was brought to my shop. That restoration is not something that I would have the experience or the confidence to tell an owner who handed me their keys and said, "Hey, this is a 3-year project. Have you done it before? Do you have experience doing this?" I see myself getting in more trouble. Not that we don't have confidence for doing multiple restorations, but I know the guys that can do those well, Grun4 and a couple other shops. And they've earned the right to really say, like, they are experienced in that domain. And I think it would be more of a shame to pay to have the owner pay for me to acquire that knowledge on their dime, so to say.
I think that's really wisdom there, because what you don't want to do is take your car to a place, to take your car to the wrong shop. And this more beginners think that they'll go with a low bid or something. They say, "I can restore that car for such and such." That would be a big mistake. You want to go to the best shop, and you don't want, that will complete it. But what you don't want to end up is a partially completed car, and taking a partially completed car to another shop. Then you're getting in so deep and you're going in the wrong direction. So I think it's really important to do your homework. Make sure you go to the specialist. That is the most important advice, assuming somebody wants to restore a car and spend the 2,000 hours to do it.
Yeah. And to quickly address Ed's comment too, there's cars that make sense, and we'll advise people that say, "Hey, I'm going to beat on this." My personal cars, I don't paint them. I have a paint shop, and I don't paint them, because once I paint them, I don't drive them. So I try not to paint my own cars. And I wear that as a badge of honor. I also don't want people to follow me around anyways. But just talking about the value that you're putting into the car, it is expensive. Time is money. There's a lot of time invested in these cars. The goal, as Bruce said, is to take it to a shop that will do it once, and will do it right, and you won't have to do it again. And a well executed restoration will last 20 plus years. It should, at least. And I've seen people who have a pristine car that just doesn't drive. It doesn't operate. You can't be confident in that car. And in 1965 and 1970, people were flogging those cars, and you should be able to get into that car and do the same if you want to. But yeah, it's very important to understand who you're working with.
I'm hearing
100%.
Restorations
and also,
have,
there's
go
also
ahead.
it's only original once, and that's the one thing. We picked up a 66 Shelby from the UK during COVID, which I didn't know what it was going to be like till it showed up, but I knew it's a Shelby. And when it showed up, it was actually so nice that I don't have the heart to restore it, because once you wreck that original paint, it's sapphire blue, it'll never be the same. And there's little things that go along with it through the history, like someone had taken it to Knott's Berry Farms and it had a bumper sticker on it. bumper stickers don't belong on collector cars, but because that car is so nice, it would be a shame, it would be a sin to disassemble it and do it. So we're driving it around and loving it. But then on the other side, I've seen two things. One, people will restore a car for more than it's worth, whether it's a Chevelle or a whatever. And I'm just thinking of reasonably priced cars for people who are thinking, I want an MG, whatever it is. You don't want to buy an MG for $5,000 and it's going to cost you $50,000 or $150,000 to restore it. And it's never going to be worth that. So you kind of find yourself upside down. It's the same thing that we do in a new car. You would never, pay more for it than it's worth. And then you're pretty much living with that car forever because you'll never sell it unless you wish to take a loss. I have a friend who just sold an E-Type. E-Types are not holding their value right now. And they had $195,000 in the restoration alone, sold it on Bring a Trailer for $133,000. So somebody got a really good deal. And so it's really important also that you find a good restoration shop that doesn't put you in a position with, you know what, I got it over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. And I get calls from this all the time. I'm sure all of us do. What do I do? We don't want it. And because I don't want someone else's problem, someone else's bad welding, someone else's poor paint job, someone lost parts. So you want to make sure that whoever you find, just like Bruce is saying, is the person, just like Phillip was saying, you want the right person who actually knows what they're doing and is willing to turn down a job. If that's, like I wouldn't take on a 300 SL either. I would say that's, we could do it, but I would be on a steep learning curve, the same type of thing. And I don't think it would be fair to the customer.
I love it. Thank you, Lauren. Let's go to segment 3. We're going to talk valuation.
Valuing restored classic cars involves assessing several factors: rarity, originality, historical significance, and restoration quality. These elements collectively determine a vehicle's market value and investment potential. Rare models with limited production numbers command higher prices. Originality, maintaining a high degree of original parts, boosts desirability among collectors. Historical significance, such as a car's role in automotive history or association with notable events, enhances its value. Quality of restoration is crucial. Precise restorations using period-correct parts can significantly increase a car's value. High-quality restorations are often verified by documentation and expert evaluations. The classic car auction market is robust, with total sales expected to exceed $3.6 billion in 2024. Specific models like 1990s and 2000s GT endurance cars are seeing increased demand. Investment returns on classic cars can be substantial, guided by market trends and historical appreciation. Understanding these valuation dynamics helps collectors and investors make informed decisions, assessing potential acquisitions and investment opportunities effectively.
Bruce, I think you mentioned Ferraris and Porsches being like a Rolex. What advice do you give to new collectors on how to identify and invest in high-value classic cars?
Well, I think just to address that video, because I did catch that, and it talks about the history and who owned the car, and that really, it means a lot. I used to own Steve McQueen's Speedster. I sold it back to Steve. I bought Clark Gable's last car, and most of my son, who's in his 40s, his friends have no idea who Clark Gable is. So I paid a real premium for Clark Gable's car, and that is, I will not get that out. I don't really call my assortment of cars a collection, but I've tried to buy cars with great history, ownership, provenance. To me, that's really, really important as to the future value of a car. Is that it maybe won a big race or was driven by a famous driver or something that makes it very special. It's rare. I saw that Ed has a particular car. It's the only one painted this color, and that matters, in the investment world. And I forgot what your question is.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, but I just rambled on because I just when I was looking at that, provenance and history matter to me a lot, and it may not matter to others, And I don't think when Ed buys a car, it's as important who owned it. It's just that he wants to, buy the car right, be able to enjoy it, and move it on maybe.
I want to go to Ed because I remember this story. Where Bruce is buying Steve McQueen's car, Ed bought like a drug dealer's car.
Many times, yes.
Nice.
Well, and to me, if you have two cars next to each other and one has an amazing story and the other one is just a good example, to me, even if it's a bad story, it's still something to talk about at Cars and Coffee, and I think it can be a whole lot of fun. I think when you look at cars that are proper rare, that's always a good start, just like Lauren said. And Lauren's Ford GT of the 2017 to 2023 generation, I mean, there's 1,350 of them, and that is rare. Historically, rare is like less than 100 or less than 250. And so when we talk about rare modern cars, it's a totally different idea than what we think about when we think about rarity a long time ago. Now, there are super significant, iconic collector cars that are not necessarily that rare, like 300 SLs and like DB5s and things like that. But they're so significant because they are so beautiful or so iconic or used in such context that that people just love them. And so that does still exist in the Top Gear and MTV Cribs generation, growing up and loving cars. And so, I got a really good deal a few years ago on the Mercedes McLaren SLR that was made famous because Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, and Britney Spears drove it around, all three of them sitting in the two seats. And Britney Spears chose to get out of it without wearing underpants. And that made a lot of news. And so it was really, really famous. And I sold it to a huge Britney Spears fan in Bulgaria for cryptocurrency. And he paid a lot of money for it. And so I think that, there are modern examples. Now, is Paris Hilton the Clark Gable of our generation? I don't believe so, thank the Lord. But I do think there is, a group of people. And I'll tell you, every single person that came into my garage for the year and a half or so that I had that car wanted to find two other friends and recreate that picture. And, in the same way that the Wolf of Wall Street Countach just brought 3 times the money that it ought to, because everybody wants to pretend that they're high on Quaaludes and try to open the door with their feet. And so, these are the modern examples of these iconic celebrity-owned or movie cars or race cars or things like that. And who knows what the next version of that will be. It's going to be hypercars, the obsession with Bugatti, Koenigsegg, and Pagani that the people that are right now 10 to 25 years old have. But we don't know. We'll find out when they start having the money to spend on them.
Well, and you own Missy Elliott's car, don't you?
I do. I have her Spiker C8 Laviolette. Now, I like it a lot
cool.
more because it's a Spiker than I do because it's hers. But she's lovely, and she has amazing taste in cars. And so, Busta Rhymes Murcielago was flying around the other day trying to get somebody to buy it. But it's, hasn't had the same uptake yet.
Lauren, how about your thoughts? Any common misconceptions about valuing a classic car?
I think a lot of times people think, that a car is worth a lot more. That's pretty standard. I think we've all seen that. Oh, I've got this Boss 429 in my garage. It's worth $1 million. Okay. What you see at Barrett-Jackson and the car that crossed the block was absolutely perfect and pristine. Your car has the engine out and it's got surface rust and you're missing half the parts. There's not a chance. And so they figure, okay, give me $500,000. It's like, no, your car is not valued that way. And I think people misunderstand when they see Mecum and Barrett-Jackson and RM and all these great auctions that are super fun, Broad Arrow, and watch them all, whether you're there or you watch them on TV, and you think my car's got to be worth that. It isn't. And so you want to use platforms like Hagerty to give you a good value. If it has significant history, just like Bruce is saying, provenance is so critical. If someone famous drove it or owned it, was used in a movie like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it's the real car, not the show car, that makes a huge difference. Or it was used in Ford versus Ferrari, the new version. Those were kit cars. So are they worth anything? Well, that's a matter of who's willing to pay for it. So if you're talking about an original bullet car, different story, worth a lot of money. So I think you really have to look at the value. Is it someone significant? Is that really what you want? I mean, just because Trump owned the car, does that make it have value? Maybe to somebody, but maybe not to others. So you have to really decide, is that an important part of the provenance of the vehicle? I personally like limited production cars, things that are rare, that are short, like they only made 17 of the Heritage in 2017 for the Ford GT. So I wanted one of those, even though Ford tried to push me to a 2018. I knew they were only going to build a few of them. And so you definitely want to try and get in on those. And there's a lot of cars even built today that you want to get in early. You want an early car, like a GTD is being made. Yes, it's a $325,000 Ford Mustang, essentially, that with, it's going to be very unique. But if you can get an early car, that's where you can turn around and sell it for money if you're allowed to flip it. We still don't know the rules. Or keep the car and own it. Maybe it's a car that was used as a show car or used in a movie. All that will increase its value. Again, once they start producing thousands of them, it doesn't hold its value.
I just watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off with my 14-year-old, and it holds up well. I enjoyed watching it again, and I think my 14-year-old liked it too. Phillip, you've seen a lot of cars, being in the family business, and since you're the youngest, I think, among us, any insights on what kind of cars you think may be becoming more valuable in the market today?
Well, obviously, the cars for me are the Gran Turismo cars. So cars, for any that don't know, it's a video game you played on your PlayStation, and my brother and two of our buddies would run the 24 hours of Le Mans, and we'd switch out every 3 hours. And whole goal of the game was to build up enough money to kind of go through this stable of cars, upgrade them, and go. And I think to this day, my favorite car from that game was the Oreca Viper that raced and won its class in the 24 hours of Le Mans, which is for sale now. But I look at those cars as, those are the big, excuse me, my lights went out in my office. There we go. Thinks I'm gone. I need to start moving a little bit more. Yeah, I think when you look at what everyone has said so far, they have to be attractive cars. They have to be historically relevant. They have to be low production numbers. They have to have good history, be in good condition. Any of those cars are going to hold their value and appreciate well. I think the big cars, there's trends always, 2 to 3 year trends, single year trends where some cars just blow up and then absolutely collapse within a year. But the overarching theme and trend is that there are some really big manufacturers that do not do poorly. And that's Ferrari, that's Porsche, that's Lamborghini, Ford. And, I know less about more of the muscle cars, but I think they've kind of, up until this year, they were kind of in a rut for a while, but I think they'll probably start doing well again. But I think for me, it's those cars, the E46 M3s that I was driven around in. If I could afford it, I'd go out and buy the Oreca Viper. But I just think, Ed has talked about it multiple times. What were your hero cars? What was on your wall? E30 M3s were on my wall. 190Es were on my wall. We've sold several of both of those cars, and they're great. They're much better before you drive them all. You get in, and all the sounds you thought they'd make in your head don't really line up, but they're great cars nonetheless. So it just changes. I still have an appreciation for everything earlier than that, and I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff in any capacity. But I think if you stick to, does it look good? Is it low production? Is it from a manufacturer that is, has been in business, is still in business, is still winning races, still has that heritage? You're going to do well. And then buy the best you can afford. It should hurt a little bit. I think if you're, the problem I have is that we get and there's nothing again. If you found your niche, do it. But what we see is that some people don't know how to work on cars, and they think they're getting a value when they buy a cheap car. And really what you're getting is unforeseen issues in the future. And when you have the best example you can afford, for me, that keeps you out of my shop and keeps you on the road having fun. So not that I want to turn anyone away from giving me a call, but we like people that have fun and be here for the right reasons. So
That's great. Love it.
That's exactly right. Let me add one thing that as we think about, people always approach us with that question of like, what are the best investment cars? And no car in history has ever beaten the S&P 500 for more than a decade. And it's really, really important to understand that if we think about long-term car ownership, there are plenty of cars that have beaten it by an order of magnitude for a short amount of time. But if you hold them for forever, it stops working out the same way it did for Duesenbergs and blower Bentleys and a lot of cars that were just the most bulletproof value cars historically. They have not continued to perform. A perfect example, last year for our RM sold a 250 GTO sort of 330 LM, and the car does about $55 million, which is a little lower than a regular 250 GTO, if there's such a thing, might have done. Maybe it would have done 75 or 80. But a friend of mine called and said, you know what? I grew up right next to that car by the guy who found it and figured out kind of the crossover history and its competition, patina and all this. And he ended up doing the restoration and he sold the car in 1981 for $1 million. I bet he's really upset by that. And so I just go in and what was the stock market return since 1981? It would have been worth $110 million rather than 55. And so even in like what would be considered the biggest win of collecting cars ever, it's still not the same thing as having the money. And so you still have to buy the cars that you wanted in the first place. And as long as you're buying based on passion, and Philip's comment of that it has to hurt a little bit is perfect. One of the best stories we've had in the last year was a guy who honestly saw the future in the Countach market, and he bought 14 of them in 2012. And within 18 months, he turned it into $3 million, which was about a $2 million profit. He had about $1 million in, sold them for $3 million. And his primary logic was, I cannot afford to buy 14 of my dream cars. No one should be able to do that. And that is the soundest logic of all, is that if you like it that much and you're not insane, there probably are a lot of people either your age or a little bit younger that have been dreaming the same dreams and hanging the same posters on the wall. And as they catch up to you, the inevitable happens.
Thank you for keeping
And also
it real.
be careful of race cars. Be very careful of race cars. What Bruce is buying is different kind of race cars than people saying, oh, look at that. There's a car that's an old stock car. They don't appreciate, well, if you're going to race it in vintage racing in SVRA or HSR, that's fine. But remember, race cars typically don't make money. I have Paul Gentilosi's championship winning car in my garage. I can't get an offer on it. And I bought it to race it. So I kind of know that. So I don't win all the time either. But it's a cool Jaguar. No one's racing Jaguars. I can't race it at Monterey. And so when you buy these cars, yes, it has historical significance. It has provenance. It's an amazing drivers in that vehicle. But even those drivers that I talked to that are still alive said they don't want it. And now I'm stuck with a car I have to backdate, and I've got to put money into this thing. And carbon fiber bodywork is not cheap. So when you start looking at race cars in general, typically race cars are not good investments. You may see something that raced at Le Mans. Sure, it might have value once it comes off the track, but it loses value very, very quickly. And unless you're going to buy it and flip it, or you've got another buyer you can sell it to, I would not recommend investing in race cars unless you're going to race it yourself and you don't care and you have unlimited cash, because the way to make $1 million in racing is to start with 3 million.
I agree.
I like that.
It's a very thin market. Race cars a very thin market. I agree.
Yep. And
Yeah,
it's
cars that take
very
a beating.
selective.
It could, I mean, we've sold race cars, and as Bruce says, it's thin. Sometimes you're dealing with one person over the length of multiple years, where you think it's worth 100,000 and he thinks it's worth half that, and because it's you and him in a room. Nothing happens for 2 or 3 years until you really get something that, and in that case, it's very hard to comp because you start talking about what's the value of a win, what's the value of it having its original gearbox, and which is rare. And these things were beaten to death, and they were not designed to survive. They were designed to be ready to race the next week. And so finding a car that has not been, that's a winner that also has not been absolutely flogged by their prospective driver, you can get lucky. But generally it's the same thing. You're going to pay out of the nose for an excellent example. And you should, but if you hold it for long enough and you cherish it and it's important to you, and it really shouldn't, that's why you should buy it. But if you're trying to make money, there's probably people that can, and they're highly involved in the race community, I would think, and they're in the paddocks all the time, and they're quick transactions, or they're looking for people that they know specifically want that car. But yeah, it's also easy to, there's a lot of fraud too, because of the lack of tracking and, the fact that the documentation was not really for some manufacturers were really great. But in some cases, the stamping is, I don't know, re-stamped, and it's really difficult to verify that information. And so I have seen that happen a lot more in the race scene than I have in the production or the production car market, so to say.
Philip, what kind of race cars are you speaking about?
Vintage race cars. So we sold Niki Lauda's 312T. We generally buy and sell Can-Am cars, Formula One cars, have done some Le Mans cars, but nothing new. The newest car we have is the MP47. It's a Monaco winning chassis with Ayrton Senna, which for us, you're starting to get into the point where you can't drive these cars anymore. And I think that is what, when we talk about the evolution of the new era, is I like Michael Schumacher. I love Lewis Hamilton. I can't drive those cars. You have to be a madman to get in there and try and drive a.
And you need a crew.
Oh yeah, you do. I mean, it's software and everything like that. So, we had at one point Michael Schumacher's championship winning F2000, and it had to be driven at Maranello. So, that's not really a fun car to own. It's a great car to own, but it's really a giant paperweight.
Investment wise, I would stay away from race cars, and I have a lot of race cars, but I don't look at them as an investment. They're just I love the history. I love looking at them, but as far as if I were going in just for appreciation, I wouldn't do a race car. And there's fakes, there's Provenance. It's definitely not for the uneducated or the faint of heart.
Well, thank you for.
I agree. Race cars are tough. They're tough, and like even like a '65 Shelby that raced, unless it had significant history, like Dan Gurney raced it, you probably don't want to invest in that car. Like you said, Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton. Okay, all right, those cars are going to have value. Or it was a Ferrari factory race car. But in general, if you're looking to invest in cars, that is a huge way to stay away from that, especially if you're new to the market.
That was great insights. We covered a lot. Shout out to Foreplay Wheels for the comments and for watching. I encourage anybody out there to put a comment or question into the comment section, and we look forward to seeing that. Let's move to segment 4.
Classic car restoration is a deeply personal and emotional journey for enthusiasts, highlighting both technical aspects and personal connections. Stories from restorers reveal the challenges and rewards of bringing vintage vehicles back to life. Finding authentic parts is a major hurdle, requiring navigation of online platforms, salvage yards, and specialized suppliers. Skill development is crucial, as many techniques are lost arts that restorers must relearn or innovate. Unexpected issues, such as hidden damage and mechanical failures, often lead to creative problem solving and budget overruns. Community restoration projects offer significant benefits. Shared knowledge among enthusiasts makes the process more manageable and enjoyable. These collaborative efforts also build strong emotional connections as participants work towards a common goal. Personal restoration journeys provide inspiration and practical insights, demonstrating the passion and dedication involved in reviving classic cars. These narratives not only showcase the technical expertise required, but also highlight the profound satisfaction derived from preserving automotive heritage.
Philip, what personal restoration project are you most proud of?
Ooh, that's a tough question. It's a tough question to answer because the way I remember them is for their issues and how they made us adapt and improve in that domain. I think the most proud and what provided us the most education was the 312T, the Niki Lauda 1975 championship winning car, which we actually did before we were an independent business from Griot's garage. So this was still when we were running Griot's Motors as collection management for Richard. And so this project was done with a group of restorers in Washington State. We had the engine built at another facility called Denison International, and the paint work done by John Byers, who's now our head painter here. But what went into that restoration, the actual restoring of the car, it's a very simple car. There's not a lot of work to be done. But the accuracy of it, because the intention was to take it to Pebble Beach at some point, was a requirement. And I think the importance of that car was such an important car that you needed to get it right. And so there was a lot of pressure to really study, call, and there was a lot of time, I think, spent by everyone who touched that car. Tim Willard, the head foreman on that car, especially, of really making sure that, all the stickers were correct, the measurement and how the distance between each other and all the little factors that would add up to make it a correct car was, I think there's a lot of pressure to do it justice and do it right. And that was the first big restoration where we kind of stepped away and looked at that and said, that's a car done right, and done well. And we took it to Pebble Beach, and it won its class actually last year. So it's done well. But I think every car that comes in has a unique set of problems, and we've tried to develop a process that is standard that kind of encompasses as many problems broadly as we can. And then I'm 35 years old. I haven't worked on these cars for 40 years at this point. I'm not, at the end of my career with a brain full of all of the knowledge. I have a fair amount, but we have a huge Rolodex of people that we call on when we get to those points where, hey, we need an expert. And that car was one of them, where we developed a lot of friendships with the right people who cared about doing the right work and doing it right. And for me, part of my investment in my business is we've got to get educated on the right way to do this. And that might also be, bringing in people who can train and apprentice young employees who have a passion for this work. So
yeah, it sounds like a car is like a kid. It takes a village. Lauren, you have some really cool cars. Any that stand out as like you had to commit to 3 years of restoration and go through this journey?
Quite a few 65 Shelbys. My husband's restored them. And I'll say it since he's not here. He's the number one restorer of 66 Shelbys in the country. His cars have won Amelia Island. There has not been an opportunity to go to Pebble Beach because typically those muscle cars don't go there. But first time to Amelia Island, we had a beautiful 65 Shelby that was all original sheet metal, which is really hard to find an original sheet metal car. So if you can find a car that hasn't been butchered, hasn't been in an accident, hasn't had lots of parts taken off, especially like tags and so forth. This car was so pristine, and it won literally everything. It was a seniors car for AACA. It won everything from the Mustang Club to Shelby Club. There wasn't an award it hadn't won. And we kept it for a while. It was quite a neat piece, but sometimes he gets rid of them. I don't even know. I always say he can have all the mistresses he wants as long as they have four wheels. So we have a lot of mistresses at the house, and that's fine. I mean, so he just showed up the other day with another car. So I'm like, oh, so we have a new mistress in the house. So, but it's fine. I mean, you gotta love what you do. So the nice thing is I travel a lot because I cover a lot of television, cover the industry, and so I know when I'm not here, he's working on the cars, and that's his passion. And I'll help when I'm back, and I've done all that. I used to design braking systems. So when it comes to that, I'm usually the one helping with that area of it. But, I think the key is that when you find a car that is really special, that you put the time and effort into it and you do the homework to find out about it. And it may not have significant provenance because most of us can't afford those type of cars, but you find a car that's got original sheet metal, that is priceless because you're not looking for body panels, because although there are aftermarket suppliers of components, many of them don't fit. And unless you've got a guy who's really good with an English wheel and a metal brake and knows how to make something that doesn't exist, it's very challenging. I guess now you can use 3D printers these days, but it's never the same. You're missing a latch on a 63 Cobra. Good luck finding it. You have to make it. Or you have to find something that's close and modify it to work. And you don't want to do that if you're showing a car. So it is challenging. So if you're going to buy a car that is really, really special, try to make sure that it's together and that whoever's restoring it gets to disassemble it. And then it makes it even better for them and better for you.
When you can't find the parts, sometimes you do have to do something truly innovative.
I will say quickly on the innovation part, we had I won't mention the car, but it was a 60s Ferrari that had collision damage from a shipping accident where the front essentially was buckled in, and we were able to use a 3D scanner to create a buck out of foam, cardboard, and wood, which we previously would not have been able to do, and we're able to replicate the untouched part of the car on the side that had the collision damage, and it worked out really well. But we would not have been able to do that without the original bucks or that people have, without 3D scanning it and then making that in CAD and printing most of the pieces out. So 3D printing, 3D scanning, that is definitely going to help, I think, some of the younger shops out in the future.
God bless technology. Bruce, any personal experiences that you can share about your restoration journeys?
Well, a car that probably the most recent car was a 300 SL Gullwing, and again we just took it to the best person, and it was complex. It was 3 years. I used the best engine builder, the best body man, the best paint shop. It was worth it for me because I'm very attached to the 300 SL Gullwing. To me, that's like the holy grail of collectibles. So that's the last car that I recall that we've done a ground up on. I try and not do ground ups. I try and get a car that's close to what I want.
So the holy grail, is there going to be one after that? What's next?
I've said, a few years ago, I said, we're done. I just don't have the time. And for me to restore a car at my age, there's a chance that I wouldn't even be able to see it done. So I try and get cars that are done, but we bought a few cars, over the last few years, but again, not with the idea of investment, just cars that please me. that I like the history or the race history or the people that owned it, and that's what drives me. And I don't need to go to the bank, and I'm pretty picky on what I buy.
How about you, Ed? You see a lot
Oh.
at the VINwiki community. Any restoration stories that stand out for you personally or for the community?
Well, since I do have to go to the bank and I'm not picky about what I buy, we're always looking for something in that end of the spectrum. And, of all the opportunities that have come out of making YouTube content about cars, the coolest one by miles was the chance to do something we call Car Trek, which is me and two other big car YouTubers, Tavarish and Tyler from Hoovie's Garage, where we blatantly rip off Top Gear and just have as much fun as we possibly can in some kind of car buying challenge. And the one that started it all was to see who could buy the coolest car for the price of a C8 Corvette in 2020, because Chevrolet was advertising that for $59,900 you could buy the world-beating C8 Corvette. And we're like, well, yeah, you can, but there's always a better option, right? And so I bought for $59,900 a manual transmission Lamborghini Gallardo Spider that had a wonderful history apart from one minor day where it was flooded in a Santa Monica mudslide. And it was barely functional, and the door panels were full of mud. There was a water line on the seats, and every error light imaginable was on. And so we did not spend years restoring it. We spent several weeks, and the night before I had to depart, it ran mostly under its own power, and we were still tracking it with water in the front differential, we would come to find out. And but it was just one of those amazing adventures, and 15 million people watched it. And so it's a car that I really loved. I had to sell it because I had to buy the next car for the next adventure. But 2 weeks ago I bought it back after the guy had it for I guess 3 years and put 89 miles on it. And a bunch of stuff doesn't work, but it turns out you can still push start a Lamborghini, and we made it home from New Jersey.
Awesome. That's a cool story.
It's nice when it comes back home.
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Well, let's wrap it up and go to the last segment.
The classic car market is evolving with significant trends, particularly the rise of electric vehicle conversions. This shift is driven by environmental concerns, technological advancements, and changing consumer preferences. The EV conversion market is expanding rapidly, with a projected compound annual growth rate of 16.5%, reaching approximately $2.6 billion by 2031. Shows like Downey's Dream Cars are popularizing EV conversions, showcasing the process in an accessible way. Technological advances such as smaller, efficient batteries and improved conversion kits are making conversions easier and more affordable. EV conversions reduce the carbon footprint of classic cars, aligning with sustainability trends in the automotive industry. Electric classics also tend to have fewer moving parts, reducing maintenance complexity and costs. High-quality EV conversions are fetching significant prices at auctions, indicating strong market potential. The market is at a crossroads between purists who value historical authenticity and modernists who embrace new technologies to enhance performance and sustainability. Understanding these trends helps collectors navigate this evolving landscape.
So I want to finish our conversation with future trends. Do you think, what future trends do you think will be significantly shaping the classic car industry in the coming years? If I can start with Lauren. Lauren, what are your predictions for the next decade? Rise of EV conversions, synthetic fuel, both?
Synthetic fuel, absolutely. Use it in all of our vehicles. Love synthetic oils. There's a lot of great products out there, some new technologies. I just saw the Valvoline was a restore and protect. It takes all the deposits out of engine. That was cool. That kind of technology I like. I am not a fan of electric cars. If you want to buy one, you should be able to buy one. But when you convert a collectible car, and I'm seeing people do this and it kills me, they'll take a beautiful 911 and they'll put an electric motor in. I'm like, oh, to me, that's a tear my heart out. Because some of these cars have significant value. And if you're going to turn into a Singer or something like that, now we're talking about something that I would definitely consider buying a mass-produced 911 that maybe doesn't have significance, something like, like a 99 or a 98, where we're kind of like, and really make it beautiful, that would be something I would consider. But I think the electric conversion, I think your biggest problem is going to be infrastructure and finding charging. And unless you've got, fastest charging available to you on a regular basis, I think you're going to be quite frustrated when you want to go on a cruise with your friends and they're all driving cool cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and whatever 300 SLs, and you can't join them because you have to stop to charge.
Ed, how about you? Future trends that you see emerging?
Well, I'm super excited to see all the electrification and hybrid stuff, because I know that they're all going to become, paperweights before too terribly long, and people will shift back to buying the stuff that I like right now. It's one of these things that we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, in the supercars and hypercars of the 2010 to 2015 era, in particular the 918 P1 and LaFerrari, are becoming hugely problematic. And you have to ask, when you buy one, does the battery work? And the answer is all too frequently no. And it's a 2-year wait right now for a LaFerrari battery, and they're $250,000. And so the same thing for a P1 battery. You can't get one today. And so if you have one that doesn't work, which is, again, super duper common, the cars are unsellable. And when we start to see that, there are definitely, in all areas of technology, people that are huge fans of what is old, but there's not a whole lot of people that are pulling out a 20-year-old computer to do their work today. They might mess around and do, but it's not useful anymore. And the thing that we love about old cars is you can still take them somewhere. You can go on a road trip. You can go on an adventure. You can go on a rally. And, I just don't think that happens for a long, long time with a lot of these, hybrid or electrified or whatever cars. And so I think it's amazing, because it cements the fact that I don't have to dream about new cars anymore. I just get to continue to love the stuff that I already did.
I love it. Philip, are you seeing any EV conversions at your
No, not here. And I'll say it kind of would scare the daylights out of me to even attempt to do that. As Ed has stated, I think there's so much to work out that I think, even these major manufacturers are finding, with Toyota and VW starting to raise their hands in regards to the actual profitability of them and how many issues they run into. I just don't want to hurdle that. I think right now what we provide our clients is classic cars and restoration of classic cars, and that's what we specialize in. I think the electric debate is a debate, and it's an entire other podcast of whether or not I think it really continues to take off. I think it has slowed down as a trend to be at least outside of California. But I love it. I like innovation. I think we should be pushing the boundaries of innovation at all times. And I think, to be frank, I think the internal combustion engine has gotten to a point now where I don't think you should be pushing more horsepower into these cars. And I think the trend I see is more companies like Singer, or at least these large manufacturers, funding smaller companies where they can exercise creative freedoms that are not bound by regulatory bodies, where they can build smaller production cars that are more they're more fun and accessible, maybe lower horsepower. There are so many, I tell people all the time, I drove the newer GT2 RS around, and there's a level of talent that I can't squeeze out of that car. And it is, you see people driving them on the Nürburgring and everything. It's like, those guys are excellent drivers. But I feel fast driving a 1992 Carrera RS. I feel fast driving a 83 911 SC. It's simple. It's analog. And so I think the trend is probably a return to a little bit of simplicity. And I think in my opinion, I think Singer and these one-off builds in the Valkyrie and all these cars are bouncing off the upper limits of what's reasonable. I think most of these cars can't even be driven. And for me, that's, I don't know, maybe that's what you want. But I think maybe a little bit of a curtailing of that is in order, but, that's just me. They don't listen to me, so they'll do whatever they want.
Bruce, you've seen a lot in your lifetime. Any predictions that will impact your 40-year-old son's journey for collecting?
Well, I don't think the electric cars are going to be a collectible item. And I like what everybody said about it. It totally resonates. I think the question's been answered. With the modern supercars, it needs such technology that, if the battery goes bad in a P1 or even a Ford GT, well, at least that's not hybrid. That's a combustion car. But if the batteries go bad, you're really in trouble. I mean, financially and technically. And with certain cars, you need the computer and you need the programming. And I just wouldn't invest in that. I don't have enough confidence in it that it'll be able to be worked on in the future. And I think there's enough stuff out there like the Singer. I think it's a great car. They reimagined Porsches. They're fun. I think that's a collectible item. I think the Roof has also been a successful Porsche tuner. To me, that's great fun, lots of performance. And if I were a betting person, I would bet that over an electric car. And I think converting like a Volkswagen and the Mustangs to some of these electrics, I mean, they are quick and fast, but I'm not sure that's, where I put my money or even be interested in buying.
It's a good point. Nobody's restoring my Apple II Plus from 1985 or something. You know what I'm saying?
I do miss my iPhone.
I think I forget who said it. You don't go back to a 30-year-old computer and start. It just doesn't work. And also, there's no community. The community, the car community, and being with people that collect cars and enjoy cars is a lot of the fun of it, and sharing, and that's a big part for me. But I can't imagine somebody just sitting there on an old iPhone and comparing notes and enjoying it just doesn't work.
Battery lasts 2 hours. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So it'll be interesting what happens to classic cars. Like today, I turn on classic rock and it's grunge, it's Nirvana. So I don't know like what my kid's classic car will be.
Never know. You never know.
Never know.
Well,
My son-in-law loves his 84 Porsche Slant Nose. He's got the last production car built. My son-in-law just loves it. He won't sell it. It's one of the coolest cars. So, when you find something you love, you own it. But like I said, it would be a shame. It would break my heart to take a beautiful classic car like your 300 SL and put an electric motor in it. Would be a sin in many countries.
Yep. Well, thank you to our esteemed panelists. It was an amazing episode. Thank you for everybody who joined and watched this episode, and for those who will watch it on replay and the audio podcast, thank you for joining. We talked about so much. We talked about aesthetics and really buying things that you like, thinking ahead and really setting the goal. Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve if you're going to go down this restoration journey? Are you trying to put it up for an award, or do you want to drive it? And really knowing how much makes sense to put in and making prudent choices. So much that we talked about. Again, thank you to our panelists. You can find Bruce Meyer. He's founding chairman of the Petersen Automotive Museum. You can visit petersen.org. Ed Bolian, thank you for joining post jury duty, founder of VINwiki. You can find him at vinwiki.com, also a fantastic YouTube channel with so many great car and auto stories. Lauren Fix is at carcoachreports.com. And Phillip Griot is president and CEO of Griot's Motors. You can find him at griotsmotors.com. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to do our best to, live our best life. And part of that could be collecting classic cars and enjoying driving. Inspired Money will be off next week for a short break. We return Wednesday, June 26th, where we're going to talk about the power of entrepreneurship, inspiring stories of success. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.